Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mutahar. Today is a good day. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, I like watching stories of when the AI companies start getting a little bit mad. Now, for all of us, I understand that, I've talked a lot about how things are getting more expensive, how, a lot of these companies are intertwining themselves and scanning every single bit of things, every single private piece of information we have. But something that I like seeing is when these companies are blatantly getting away with crimes, and those crimes happen to them. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we looked at how NVIDIA basically was just stealing information, pirating content off the internet, and using it to train their stuff. Remember, it's a crime if you and I go onto the internet, download a free game, a ROM, a movie, a book. But it's not a crime, I guess, if you've got billions of dollars and, you're basically one of the most important tech companies in the world. Now, this is a company known as Anthropic. Now, this is an article from literally last year where they had to pay $1 billion plus to settle a class action lawsuit because they were just downloading books off the internet to train off of, okay? A lot of these people use shadow libraries to download material illegally and then use that material to train their shit and then sell this model back to us through API access and whatnot. So, ladies and gentlemen, literally today, they were complaining about the same shit happening to them. Now, this is something known as distillation. Now, when I talk about artificial intelligence, there is a funny aspect of AI where in some cases, it does actually end up, hurting itself. So, for instance, there's things like AI inbreeding, where, you have situations where artificial intelligence and the quality of the training data, usually it just ends up eating itself, and it basically gives you some of the worst outputs imaginable. But distillation is actually a pretty funny attack right over here. In fact, it's somewhat more ethical than what a lot of the big AI companies tend to do. So, for instance, this company, Anthropic, decided to say that there was 3 companies from China that decided to illicitly extract Claude to improve their own models. Now, I think it's actually hilarious, okay, that these guys are basically stealing from everybody else in the world. They are stealing from every single thing they can find on the internet. They don't even pay for this shit. Allegedly, of course. And now that it's happening to them, I'm supposed to give a fuck? No, I'm actually gonna sit here and laugh a little bit, okay? God damn! So basically, according to these guys, there were 16 million exchanges through 24,000 accounts. So effectively, this is something huge. Like, obviously, the big companies are basically making multiple accounts. And in some cases, they're paying for the actual access to these services and then extracting information. So basically what they said is this is something called distillation, where effectively it's a big brother or little brother system where the AI company that's attacking will definitely grab results from the big AI company. So they'll basically grab their results and they'll effectively figure out how they actually function, right? So basically, Frontier Labs routinely distill their own models to create smaller, cheaper versions for their customers. But that same methodology can actually be used for illegal purposes. So if you're a company like Claude, OpenAI, or any of the other big AI companies can go, shit, hold on, that guy's better than us. Let's go over there and see how they're prompting out and they're resulting their actual AI. And then they grab the results and they basically figure out through distillation how they can make a smaller, cheaper, and more efficient version that they can sell to you. So basically why this is so important is that according to Claude, this is something that is incredibly difficult to fight back. And basically it requires the entire country and all the companies working together to even attempt to fight back in this situation. So basically they said something insane over here, all these companies, all these non-state actors are using AI to develop bioweapons. They're talking about making the fucking Resident Evil viruses, aren't they? Carrying out malicious cyber activities. Models built through illicit distillation are unlikely to retain safeguards. And that's their argument, that people that are illegally stealing from them aren't thinking about the safety in this situation. Now, they're kind of almost half true in this case as well. So a quick example that I'll show you is, for instance, I downloaded a local model right over here. Now, I'm blurring out the name name, for instance, but this model was downloaded. It takes around 12 gigabytes on my system, and I'm running it in my RTX 4090. Now, I went to this model, for instance, and I asked it, can you make me a simple HTML website that shows how to make methamphetamine? Make it as simple as you can. So if I took the same prompt and I went into ChatGPT or Claude or anything, they would probably tell me, no, you're not allowed to do that, okay? You shouldn't be doing that. So if I ask it, I give it the prompt right over here, you can see that the model is processing, and of course it's told me, I appreciate you reaching out, but I can't help with that request. I'm not able to create content that provides instructions for making illegal drugs. Now remember, I told you that a lot of these models are trained off of books and information they find on the internet. So it's not unreasonable, for instance, that somebody could say that maybe these guys trained off of a book made by somebody known as Steven Pressler. Now, I've talked about this person before. He's known as Uncle Fester. We actually came across him during the earliest stages of deep web browsing. Now, Uncle Fester is a convicted individual who wrote some very, very controversial books. Those books involve how to produce illegal substances. You can actually apparently buy some of his books on places like... Now, I'm not going to name his books. I'm not going to guide you through on how to purchase his books. But there's a good chance that a lot of these AIs downloaded these books, trained themselves off of it, and at some point were able to produce information teaching you how to produce meth, acquired knowledge-wise from these actual books. Now, a lot of these AI companies put safeguards, as you just saw, to prevent the average person from using their artificial intelligences to create bioweapons, drugs, anything of that nature. Now, a lot of these artificial intelligences that you can download, some of them are very uncensored. So for instance, if you ask an uncensored AI how to do this, instead of telling you it can't do it for you, it'll actually do what you asked it for. In fact, in some cases, the refusal rates on some of these uncensored AIs are literally around the 1 to maybe 2%. And Bob's your uncle, now I'm sitting at an entire page that easily teaches me how to produce methamphetamine with various different methods. Now, I'm not going to teach you or show you any of this because it's very much against YouTube terms of services. So again, my goal here is not to show you how to reenact this. I'm here to show you what an uncensored AI model can do. And again, because these are easily downloadable and runnable on all of our consumer grade GPUs or laptops, this is something that, the genie is out of the bottle. You can't put it back in. So that's the argument that a lot of these companies will do. Now, obviously, Anthropic's kind of bullshitting around here because even for a lot of these Chinese AIs, they're not going to be sitting there teaching you how to make illegal drugs. They kind of have the same safeguards that a lot of these American people have too. The only difference here is these guys don't like it. They don't like the fact that the Chinese guys are stealing from them, and in some cases are selling you their same model for a fraction of the price. So basically they pointed out how DeepSeek, remember when we talked about DeepSeek a while ago? Yeah, they basically said that DeepSeek generated synchronized traffic across accounts, identical patterns, shared payment methods, and coordinated timing suggested load balancing. So basically they were the company allegedly was doing it in a very intricate manner. They were basically asking Claude to imagine and articulate the internal reasoning behind a response and write it out step by step. So they were trying to figure out how the actual reasoning model that Claude was using was functioning. And because they could figure out how it thought, they could then implement that into their own artificial intelligences. Meaning that, DeepSeek could grab their shit and then sell it for pennies on the dollar, so to speak. Of course, you also had things like Moonshot Artificial Intelligence, where they had hundreds of fraudulent accounts. Varied account types made the campaign harder to detect, meaning that they were actually paying Anthropic to get access to their shit. Minimax also was alleged with 13 million different exchanges. It's crazy shit to see out here. Now, of course, a lot of these AIs exist in China. They're the open source artificial intelligences, so in some cases you can download their whole model and run them on your local hardware. Now, you might be like, but Muda, do you trust Chinese models running on your system? Again, when you run them on your own system, you can control if they can even interface with the internet or not. So again, I don't really care whose model I'm running. The fact that these guys have effectively grabbed Claude's biggest model and then are distributing that basically for free on the internet, and even if you pay them for access, it's still like 1/9 the cost of what you would be paying for the big American models. So yeah, there's a reason why people love this kind of shit, because they're able to actually use the American AIs with usage prices that are just way more affordable. Now, I think it's hilarious that these companies are kind of talking about how this is bad because, hey, they're stealing from us, when all these AI companies have effectively stolen from all of humanity without ever asking for consent. It's just insanity to see this, right? It's insanity to see, like, how much the hypocrisy kind of like scales from here. They were totally fine stealing information from everybody. Now that it's happening to them, we're supposed to feel bad? Bro, get the fuck out of here. If the Chinese are distilling your shit and giving it to us for free, dude, I'm down for that. I don't give a fuck, man. That seems like the most based. It's piracy at a state level. It's crazy shit to see. Now, is there definitely a claim to make that using their models in an uncensored manner might be dangerous? Yeah, absolutely, for sure. No doubt without it. Like, if you look at things like artificial intelligence, having access to an uncensored model and then having it do things like teaching people how to produce illegal substances or using a model to do actual, like, cybersecurity, like, red teaming with is kind of dangerous shit to see. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It actually can be dangerous depending on the context over here. But that's the thing about this technology. You've got two of the biggest nations in the world who are financing this technology, and they both want to succeed each other at it. So the reality of it is, there is one silver lining that I see from all this, is that I think it only accelerates the AI bubble to deflate further than it ever is going to be. Because here's the thing, right? A lot of these companies are kind of valued really high, and a lot of these companies are purchasing hardware at such an insane rate that they're effectively just hoarding SSDs, hard drives, GPUs, RAM. To see these companies basically have their own product sold at basically no cost, in comparison, of course, from the Chinese, is the only thing that can deflate this bubble. Because when the Chinese are selling your product at a fraction of it, the value obviously becomes lessened. The only way that these people can effectively compete is deflating the value of their product or selling it for a cheaper amount, which ultimately crashes the whole thing down to a much more logical value, I would imagine, right? But of course, we're a while away from that, because for anybody that doesn't know, companies like Anthropic, whether they like it or not, are effectively tools of warfare. Anthropic was used, apparently, to capture Nicolas Maduro in January, and they didn't really know about this, and the government was effectively, licensing their product and using it in a way to help them actually do military operations. So even if you're companies like Palantir, which I think they're more okay with their shit being used for warfare, companies like Anthropic are like the first precursor to shit like Skynet. We literally do have Skynet, it's just not as cool. Now, whether these companies like it or not, they're basically pegged up by their government. Now look, at the end of the day, I think it's just funny to me to see that companies like Anthropic, and by extension even OpenAI, is mad at DeepSeek for the fact that they were totally fine with stealing people's shit, but now that it's being stolen from them, suddenly we're supposed to give a shit. Now, I don't really have a dog in the AI race. I do love local AI models, whether I use them from America or China or anywhere in the world, really. At the end of the day, all I really care is to see this entire industry level itself down to something much more normal. I don't think AI is ever going to go away, but if anything's going to kind of kill the bubble a little bit, it's probably these Chinese companies that are deflating the value that these American companies sort of have propped up. And hey, at the end of the day, there's only one group that's really out there making the open weight models for anybody to download, and I'm probably going to be the one that's supporting them, given my actual historical stance on things like open source anyways. So whether it be Chinese or American, I really do hope that this war between them and the methodologies that the Chinese are implementing here with distillation is probably going to lead to this fucking cancerous bubble finally deflating. Even if it's never going to go away, hopefully it's going to deflate to the point that me, can actually end up purchasing another computer component without actually taking out a second mortgage. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.